It is a July afternoon, and the back door of the house opens and closes 6 times in 20 minutes because the children are going in and out, and every time that door opens, 3 or 4 flies come in with whoever is walking through it. By 4 o'clock, there are a dozen flies in the kitchen. By supper time, the food on the table has to be covered the moment it is set down, or something lands on it. By evening, you have killed 8 flies with the swatter and found 3 more on the window screen trying to get out, and tomorrow it starts again exactly the same way. This is the pattern on every farm and every property, with any animals, any outdoor cooking, any garden, any composting. Through every summer from May through September, flies are not a problem you solve once. They are a pressure you manage continuously with the right system, the way you manage weeds in a garden or moisture in a root cellar, not by eliminating them from the landscape, which is not possible and not desirable because flies are part of the decomposition system that keeps organic material cycling, but by keeping their population and their presence in the areas where people live and eat and work at a level that does not make life miserable. My grandfather had a fly system, not a product. A system. A set of methods, some of them very old, some of them practical improvisations he developed over decades of farming, that together kept the fly pressure in and around the house at a manageable level, without a single synthetic chemical applied anywhere near the kitchen, the garden, the beehives, or the animals. He kept bees his entire adult life. He would not put anything near the house that might drift to the hives. Everything he used was safe for bees, safe for his dogs, safe for the children running in and out of that same back door. I am Hope Yoda, and I want to share that system with you today. The complete version, not just one trap or one plant, because a single method addresses one part of the fly life cycle or one area of the property and leaves the rest of the pressure unchanged. A system addresses multiple parts simultaneously, and the result is dramatically different from what any single product or any single trap produces on its own. Before I show you the methods, I want to address something directly, because there is a method going around online right now that I have seen shared many thousands of times and that I want to be honest about. The method shows a plastic bag filled with water and a few pennies hung near a door, claiming that it repels flies by confusing them with a visual distortion that mimics a large compound eye or disrupts their navigation. I want to tell you clearly that this method has no credible scientific support and does not work in any controlled test that has been conducted on it. I have tried it myself, as have neighbours who asked me about it before trying, and the results are consistent with the scientific assessment, which is that flies land on and around the bag with complete indifference. I am telling you this specifically because I know some of you have tried it and found it did not work, and concluded that natural fly control simply does not work. It does work. The water bag's not the method. What I am about to show you is, let me start with the biology, because understanding the fly life cycle is what makes the system logical rather than arbitrary. The common housefly, Musca domestica, completes its entire life cycle from egg to adult in 7 to 10 days, under warm summer conditions. A single female can lay up to 500 eggs in her lifetime, deposited in batches of 100 to 150 eggs at a time in organic material, rotting food, animal manure, decomposing plant matter, any moist organic substrate that the larvae can feed in after hatching. The eggs hatch within 12 to 24 hours. The larvae, commonly called maggots, feed and develop through 3 instars over 3 to 7 days before moving to a drier location to pupate. Adults emerge from the pupal case and are sexually mature and capable of reproduction within 2 to 3 days. This rapid life cycle is why a fly problem that seems manageable one week can feel overwhelming the next, and why removing breeding material is the highest leverage intervention available, because it interrupts the cycle at the stage of greatest multiplication potential. The first and most important component of any fly management system is breeding site reduction. Every organic material on your property that is warm, moist, and accessible to a female fly is a potential fly nursery. And reducing these sites reduces the reproductive capacity of the local fly population at its source, rather than attempting to manage the adult population that has already emerged from breeding sites. Animal manure is the primary fly breeding site on any property with livestock or poultry. A single pile of horse or cow manure left undisturbed in summer conditions can produce thousands of adult flies per week. The management approach is not necessarily removing all manure from the property, which is impractical on a working farm, but managing it in ways that reduce its attractiveness as a breeding site. Composting manure in active, hot compost piles rather than leaving it in cool, moist heaps dramatically reduces fly breeding in it, because the internal temperatures of an active compost pile, commonly exceeding 130 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit in its active phase, kill fly eggs and larvae effectively. A managed compost pile produces far fewer flies than the same volume of unmanaged manure, sitting in a cool pile with good moisture retention. Spreading manure thinly on fields rather than piling it also reduces breeding success, because thin spreading allows the surface to dry quickly, which kills eggs and early instar larvae that need consistent moisture to survive. Kitchen and food waste is the second major breeding site around the house itself. A compost bin with a properly fitting lid, a garbage can that seals completely, and the habit of not leaving food scraps exposed on the counter or in an open container are the household-level breeding site reductions that make the biggest difference in the fly pressure immediately around the kitchen. My grandfather had an iron rule in the house during summer that nothing that could attract flies sat uncovered and nothing went into an open container outside. It was not a rule about hygiene in the abstract. It was a practical system for not creating the breeding sites that generated the pressure in the first place. The second component of the system is the Venus flytrap plants at every door and window. I am joking about that specifically, but I'm not joking about the principle, which is that certain plants have well-documented repellent effects on flies, and that strategic planting of these plants near the places where flies enter the house and the places where people sit and eat outdoors makes a measurable difference in fly presence in those areas. Basil is the plant with the strongest evidence and the most practical application for housefly repellents in a residential setting. Houseflies avoid basil because of the volatile compounds it emits, primarily linalool, eugenol, and citronellol, which are detected by the fly's olfactory system as signals to avoid the area. Pots of living basil placed on windowsills, on the kitchen counter near the door, and on the outdoor table where you eat significantly reduce fly landing frequency in those specific areas. The plant needs to be living and actively growing, not dried, because the volatile emission is a property of the living plant, releasing compounds through its leaves. Dried basil has essentially none of this effect. Lavender has a similar effect through similar volatile compound emission, and has the additional benefit of being a strongly positive plant for honeybees, which means planting it near your beehives or bee foraging areas actually serves double duty, repelling flies from those areas while providing nectar and pollen for the bees. Lavender planted along the foundation of the house, particularly near the back door and near windows that are frequently opened, provides a continuous aromatic environment that flies prefer to avoid. Mint, particularly spearmint and peppermint, has documented fly repellent properties and has the additional characteristic that it spreads aggressively once established, which is a disadvantage in a garden bed, but an advantage along a fence line or a building foundation where you want continuous coverage. Plant mint in containers near doors and near the outdoor eating area, or plant it directly along the foundation, accepting that it will spread. Tansy is the traditional farm fly repellent plant that my grandfather grew specifically for this purpose, and that is less commonly known today than basil or lavender. It is a tall, strongly aromatic perennial with yellow button flowers that has been planted near farmhouse doors and near outbuildings specifically to repel flies since at least the medieval period in European farming communities, and its presence in the Amish agricultural tradition in this region goes back as far as anyone on this property can remember. It contains thujoin, a volatile compound that is highly repellent to flies and that also repels other insects including ants and moths. Plant it at the corners of outbuildings, near manure storage areas where you want to reduce fly emergence, and along the foundation near the most used doors. A word of caution about tansy: it is toxic if ingested in significant quantities and should not be planted where livestock or children could eat large amounts of it. As an ornamental border plant, along foundations and fence lines, it is safe. As a garden plant that children or animals browse freely, it is not appropriate. The third component of the system is trapping, and I want to explain the difference between trapping, that is part of a system, and trapping as a standalone intervention, because the expectation matters for how you use it. A fly trap, whether commercial or homemade, catches adult flies. it does not reduce the breeding site that is producing more adult flies continuously. A trap placed near an active breeding site will fill quickly and will give the impression of excellent effectiveness while the overall population is barely affected because the trap is catching a small fraction of the flies emerging from the nearby breeding site every day. Trapping is effective as part of a system, placed in locations away from breeding sites to intercept flies before they reach the house and food preparation areas, not as a primary intervention placed near the breeding source. The homemade fly trap that my grandfather used and that I continue to use requires 3 things: a plastic bottle or a glass jar with a wide mouth, a bait solution, and a funnel or cone of paper that fits into the opening to guide flies in while making exit difficult. The bait solution is the key, and the one that works best is not the sweet fruit-based bait that most homemade trap recipes specify. The sweet bait attracts some flies but also attracts bees, which defeats the entire purpose on a property with beehives and creates an ethical problem on any property where bee welfare is a concern. The bait that attracts houseflies specifically, with far less attraction for bees, is protein-based. A piece of raw meat or raw fish the size of a large marble placed in the bottle with a small amount of water creates a fermenting protein bait that is intensely attractive to houseflies and significantly less attractive to bees, which are seeking sugars and pollens rather than protein. The smell of this bait is, I will be honest, quite unpleasant to humans as well, which is why the trap needs to be placed well away from the house and the outdoor eating area, 15 to 20 feet minimum, and downwind from both. The trap placed in this way draws flies away from where you are rather than trapping flies that have already reached where you are. Check the trap every 2 to 3 days and add water to replace what evaporates, which concentrates the bait. Empty and replace the bait material every week or when the trap is full. For a property with significant fly pressure in summer, 2 or 3 of these traps placed strategically around the perimeter of the house and near outbuilding entrances provide continuous reduction of the incoming fly population. The 4th component is the fly strip inside the house itself, specifically in areas where flies that do get inside tend to congregate. Flies are attracted to warmth and light, and they tend to collect near windows and near light sources. A sticky fly strip hung near a window or near a light fixture inside the kitchen, the pantry, or any room where flies get in regularly catches the flies that make it past the other layers of the system. The limitation of fly strips is aesthetic, because a strip covered in dead flies is not an attractive feature in a kitchen, but their effectiveness at catching flies that are already inside the house is genuine and they are inexpensive enough to replace frequently. Positioning them away from direct sight lines behind a curtain, near a window, or near the ceiling, in a less visible corner, makes them less visually prominent while maintaining their function. The 5th component, and the one that ties the whole system together at the building level, is physical exclusion, which means making it physically difficult for flies to enter the building at all. Tight-fitting screens on every window and every door that is opened during fly season with no gaps, no tiers, and no warped frames that leave openings at the corners. A screen door on every exterior door with a self-closing mechanism so it closes completely every time, rather than being left slightly open. Weather stripping around door frames that eliminates the gaps at the edges and the bottom where flies enter when the door is technically closed. And the habit of closing doors quickly, which sounds trivially obvious, but which in a household with children going in and out repeatedly on a summer afternoon, is the source of the majority of the fly entries that make indoor fly control necessary in the first place. My grandfather would tell you that the best fly control is a house that flies cannot get into in the first place, and that every other method is addressing flies that have already gotten past the first defense. He was right about that, the way he was right about most practical things. I want to say something about the broader context of why this system matters beyond the inconvenience of flies, because I think it is worth saying directly. The fly management system I have described uses no synthetic pesticide, no chemical spray, no fogging system, and nothing that poses any risk to the honeybees that are essential to the productivity of any garden or any orchard or any property that relies on pollination. Commercial fly sprays and fly control systems that use pyrethroids and organophosphates are not selective. They kill what they contact, and what they contact includes the beneficial insects, the parasitic wasps that control aphids and caterpillars, the ground beetles that control soil pests, and the bees that make the garden possible. But The system I have described targets flies specifically through their biology, their attraction to specific baits, and the management of their specific breeding requirements. And it does all of this without affecting the insect community that makes this property functional. This is the thinking that runs through the books, the knowledge of how to manage every aspect of a working property and a working household through methods that work with the biology of the land rather than against it, that cost almost nothing and that have been tested and refined across generations of practical use. The link is in the description, or find everything on our channel. Put a pot of basil on your windowsill this week. Hang a protein bait trap 15 feet from your back door. Check the compost bin lid. And then watch what changes about the fly pressure in those specific areas over the following week. Start with one change and observe the result before adding the next. That is how a system gets built, one verified observation at a time. Tell me in the comments how bad your fly pressure is, what month and what area of the country you are in, and what you have tried before. And if your father or grandfather had a fly management method that I have not described here, I want to know what it was. Those old methods that were never put in a book are exactly what this channel exists to collect and share. I read every single comment. Next time, since we have covered the flies, I'm going to show you the method my grandfather used for yellow jackets and wasps around the outbuildings and the eating area that is completely different from the wasp trap methods I have covered before, using a material that has been in every barn in this region for 100 years, and that costs almost nothing. I will see you then. The flies have been a summer problem since the first farm existed. The methods to manage them without chemical spray have existed just as long. They simply stopped being passed down when the spray can arrived. That is how it was done before the spray can, and that is how it is still done on any property that remembers.